Okay, and just the music, Jude, faded out, please. Thank you. Good morning. Welcome. Namaste. Good to be with all of you. We are in a place here this morning to go through a nice quieting down of the mind, a deepening of self-reflection. And in that quieting space, we can hopefully discover the hidden gem that is our true nature. And this true nature is what we just honored when we had acknowledged in that namaste that there is a spark of divinity within all of us. And that spark of divinity is experiencing itself as a human being right now. But this spark is an eternal oneness with the source of all. And so as we come here in our church service, we are actually turning our attention onto the spark and away from the world. What the spark is projecting out is oftentimes a world of confusion, a world of obscurity. And so we want to actually calm and relax all of that, turn within, and bring our full attention onto the spark, because it's within the discovery of our true nature as this light of God that we realize that the world can offer us nothing. On Thursday nights, we have a Zoom meeting that focuses on A Course in Miracles. And we have been looking at the idea that the world is actually a desert. You get this a lot in many traditions. The Course is no exception. And he says the desert is a place that lacks water, which is it lacks the sustenance that would fulfill you truly. And so when you realize that you're in a desert, the only option left is to leave. And so that's what we're practicing here. We're practicing this turning away from the world. What in biblical parlance is often termed repentance. It's a turning away from the outward focus and a turning within to see that we actually are everything we're seeking. And so to discover that is different than to conceptualize it. And so we want to get into a practice this morning where it first starts with our breathing, where we can use our breath to calm and relax, let go of anything that we're carrying, any grievances, any preconceptions. So find yourself turning within, relaxing and breathing. Just feel present in the moment, centering within the here and the now. And as you relax and calm the breath, become more aware of the empty space within and without. Focus less on what's arising, all of the phenomena of emotions and thoughts and images. And become more in touch with the empty space or the field of potentiality. And it's from this place of quiet listening and calming self-reflection that we can do our deepest work in this rediscovery process. And really, too, the calming is a letting go of identifying with the thoughts that we have, these habitual thoughts of good and bad, right and wrong, self and other. These are the clouds that block the sun at the core of being. And so we want to allow those clouds to be swept away this morning as we calm and relax and open to our own radiant present as this field of pure potentiality. And so it is. When we begin to deepen our spiritual practice and become more refined in our understanding, we begin to see a secret language within all of these traditions. We begin to actually have the ability to decode a lot of the metaphors that are being used in these esoteric or mystical traditions. And one of the codes that go on within the Islamic Sufi tradition is that when we are identified as our thoughts, we are in a state of drunkenness in the sense that we are identified with the world and we're identified as the self of the body. And when we're in a drunken state, we are cutting ourselves off or ignoring the deeper voice or the deeper presence that is within our own being. And you'll see a similar metaphor within the Lotus Sutra, which is a Mahayana scripture of Buddhism. And in the story is about two guys that go out partying, and they get really drunk. And the next morning, one of the guys sews a priceless gem within the lapel of his friend and leaves. And years later, he comes back and he sees that his friend is scouring garbage cans and eating trash in total destitution. And he said, "What are you doing? If you only realized I had put this priceless gem inside your lapel, you would have been the richest man in the city." And Buddha's using that story, again, as a metaphor to show that we have within us something that is of priceless value, that we, if we discovered it, would know that we are and have everything. The reason why we didn't discover it is because we're drunk on identifying with the thoughts of our own self-generated illusion or ego identity. And so these teachings cut through that. They open us up to a depth within ourselves that we have yet to discover. And as we begin to sense it and move into it and feel it, it becomes all that we want to live for. But we have challenges along the way, as we will see now, as we turn within the teachings of A Course in Miracles. So this is what we're talking about. In the workbook lesson, God's voice speaks to me all through the day. It's this idea that we have within us this priceless jewel, which is our own divine presence. And it's constantly reminding us of who we are. Every time we breathe, in fact, say the yogis, our breath is reminding us of who we are. That when we inhale, there's the S sound, and when we exhale, there's the H or aspirate sound, and in Sanskrit, this comes out to say, Soham, I am the soul. And so the yogis say every breath is japa, every breath is a meditation, that you're reminding yourself that you are the soul with every breath. Are we paying attention? Are we feeling that? Are we knowing that? God's voice speaks to me all through the day, moment by moment. And so this is quite the lesson, lesson 49. Listen to what he says. It is quite possible to listen to God's voice all day without interrupting your regular activities in any way. The part of your mind in which truth abides is in constant communication with God, whether you are aware of it or not. It is the other part of your mind that functions in the world and obeys the world's laws. It is this part that is constantly distracted, disorganized, and highly uncertain. The part that is listening to the voice of truth is calm, always at rest, and wholly certain. It is really the only part there is. The other part is a wild illusion, frantic and distraught, but without reality of any kind. Try today not to listen to it. Try to identify with the part of your mind where stillness reigns forever. Try to hear God's voice call to you lovingly, reminding you that your Creator has not forgotten you. And before we leave this lesson, here's a bit of practice to take with us on our journey this morning. So wherever we go, remember, he says it's quite possible to listen to God's voice all day, no matter what you're doing. It's just as easy as turning your attention back to your breath and reminding yourself that you are the one soul in all life. And so this is what Jesus says again in this teaching. Listen in deep silence. Be very still and open your mind. Go past all the raucous shrieks and sick imaginings that cover your real thoughts and obscure your eternal link with God. Sink deep into the peace that waits for you beyond the frantic, riotous thoughts and sounds and sights of an insane world. So get the image of taking your awareness deep within your core, beyond words, beyond thoughts, into the silence. Just this resting and deep listening. You get more work done when you can abide within the deep, silent listening than you would in outward-going activity. Remember that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, there's always this idea of the Sabbath. And the Sabbath is built within the 7-day week as a way of stopping all outward-going activity and paying attention to the divinity. And so this is what's really important to fuel your week, if you will, that you come home to yourself, you know what is real and unreal, and so that your activities become a expression of this knowing. So again, listen in deep silence. Oftentimes when we're in a teaching like this, we will naturally feel antsy because remember, there's another part of our mind that is wild and frantic and distracted. And we're used to that part. We identify with that part. We live as that part. So when you embark on this teaching, in whatever form or tradition, it's about taming the monkey mind. It's about illuminating your inner darkness, dispelling the ignorance, waking up from the sleep of ego. So listen in silence. Become more and more intimately associated with the silence at the center of your being, knowing it to be the jewel, the treasure hidden in the field. So be willing, he says, to let go of all of the raucous shrieks of the ego, right? These thoughts that will come up to dissuade, to throw you off track, to convince you that this is a silly idea. Let go of all that's arising right now and continue to move towards the silence. Know that that part of the mind is going to do everything it can to dissuade you from entering your own silence. Don't listen to it. So, some poetry from Hafiz. This is It Felt Love. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to this world all its beauty? It felt the encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. So as we go within and soften and quiet and open to the silence, we will also sense in whatever way that we feel most comfortable, our guide, our guru, our teacher, the voice of God in some symbol or form that will take us by the hand and lead us further in than we can go ourselves. Okay? And as we take the hand of our master, teacher, we will see difference in this inner journey at first. But as we keep going to our core, and all of the identity of the ego begins to shed and dissolve, the teacher and the student merge as they go into the center of the heart. They become one being, one essence, one I. So feel that light, open to it. Know that you're worthy of it. Know that it's you. Again, Hafiz, this one is called Until. I think we are frightened every moment of our lives until we know him. So remember what Jesus was saying in that lesson. There's a part of our mind that is in constant communion or union with God's voice, God's love, God's heart. There's a part of us that never left our source. We're ignoring that part oftentimes, ordinarily. We're identified with that small fragment, that wild, frantic, distracted part of the mind. And that part of the mind that we identify with is always frightened. It does anything it can to calm and distract and numb and avoid and placate that anxiety and that fright. But until we come to know ourselves as him, with him, that fright, that fear will never cease. It's really good to get. It's really good to face that stark choice. You're either in illusion or you're in truth. And the choice means that you're either willing to stay in illusion or you're willing to come to truth. Right? And so that part of your mind that you identify with, that we oftentimes think is the separate self, the separate me that wants to get enlightened and wants to live this life that we have planned for ourselves, that's all being done from a place of not knowing who you are. It's uncertain. And so to know that that is the illusion of yourself and to let that go is a major step on the path. Right? Until we do, we're frightened. This is a short one. It's called The Suburbs. Complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God. Complaint is only possible while living in the suburbs of God. So again, as long as we're attached to the separate, the limited, the illusory, we are finding grievances, we are finding things to upset us. But when we come home to the heart, to the silence, to the peace that we are, that we've never really left, there are no complaints. We will actually begin to see that all things are perfect. And as we're making this journey towards our own center, into our own innermost being, it's going to upset that little part of you that you've identified with. And so it's going to undergo a journey of shedding or ego death. And so as we make this turnabout within our mind, leaving the world in the desert of illusion and coming home to the ever-flowing streams of the living water within, we have to actually begin to recognize that when we go through these periods of ego death, loneliness, despair, anger, frustration, betrayal, in whatever forms they are taking, these are actually the opportunities that we have put before us that grace will actually take us further in if we will allow it. So, another one from Hafiz. My eyes so soft. Don't surrender your loneliness so quickly. Let it cut more deep. So in other words, while we're making our journey inward, we may feel terrible. We may feel that our life is falling apart. We may feel this loneliness coming on because if we're not being the ego, we're dissolving the ego, and the ego is going to go through its temper tantrum and its death. It's going to show its true nature, and its true nature is utter loneliness. And so when you start to really feel the loneliness, don't numb, don't run away from it, don't distract. Let it cut more deeply, is Hafiz's suggestion. Let it ferment and season you. As few human or even divine ingredients can. So in other words, he's saying there's a medicinal value to your loneliness, to your pain. There's gold in the wound, but you have to allow it to take its work within you. Right? So I'll share a little bit of what happened last week. I said last week that you get to see the rawness up here, that I'm not trying to be somebody. And as a result, it doesn't always look pretty because ego death is unexpected sometimes, and it will come in the craziest of ways. And so in this place of my ego, like I said last week, wanted to be somebody special, as most egos do. And when I found spiritual teachings and I found a natural knack for them and I had deep insight, it seemed, and I was good at communicating, well, hey, I'm a spiritual teacher and I'm going to make my livelihood and, make my mark in the world and be somebody. Kind of like Steve Martin, right? And this ego death actually has the marks of watching your dreams sometimes completely disintegrate in front of you. Like everything you were working for and striving to get and to be actually comes to a crashing halt. And it seems to be a devastation. And like I had said last week, in A Course in Miracles, he says, your greatest successes are usually your worst failures. And your ultimate defeats are actually when you're growing the most. It's the opposite than what we think because we're identified as that little frantic, frightened voice, that little self. And so when the ego came crashing down in front of many of you here last week, I accepted it. I let it cut deep. Didn't mean it didn't hurt. And then when I went home, my only prayer as I was going through this pain of death was praying to God, and this was my mantra, again, raw and transparent, please kill me. Just kill me. And I was saying it from the ego because I was licking my wounds and full of self-pity and why me and when is this ever going to why doesn't ever go right for me? But as I kept praying or doing this japa, this mantra of kill me, I began to see it through the eyes of a Sufi, which is the fana, which is the self-annihilation. You have to get to the place where you're ready to die at your core. So how beautiful to fall on your face. How beautiful to be humiliated publicly. Right? That this path will oftentimes, and Sri Aurobindo says this a lot in his integral yoga, that when you set upon this path of awakening, you think you're going to get the joy and the peace and the aha and the, oh my God, I love everyone and this is beautiful. That will come. But before that comes, or intermittent and peppered within that experience, is your own death. You will die to the self that you know. So when you're feeling the loneliness, let it cut deep. You could actually get to a place in yourself where you're doing this alchemical transmutation on pain. That when you feel the loneliness and you feel the despair and the existential dread, you could see it as medicine, right? Pharmakon is the Greek word for medicine, but it's also the Greek word for poison. It's how you're perceiving it. So loneliness can be your poison, or it can be your medicine. Right? Failure can be your poison or your medicine. And if you're surrendering your heart to God and you're undergoing these trials and tribulations, just know that it's grace. Know that you're being guided through it, and it's a necessary step along the way, or it wouldn't be happening. So, a couple more here. This is entitled, She Responded. The birds' favorite songs you do not hear, for their most flamboyant music takes place when their wings are stretched above the trees, and they are smoking the opium of pure freedom. It is healthy for the prisoner to have faith that one day he will again move about wherever he wants, feel the wondrous grit of life less structured, find all wounds, debts stamped, canceled, paid. I once asked a bird, how is it that you fly in this gravity of darkness? She responded, love lifts me. Right? So the Sufi path of love is that you become willing, like the moth to the flame, to annihilate your ego in the heart of God. That God becomes your beloved. There's nothing in the world or in relationships of bodies that you find comparable or alluring enough to take you away from the beloved at the core of your being, who authored you and breathes you with the breath of the All-Merciful into existence, instant by instant. Once you begin to hear that song, that voice, you'll rush to it for annihilation, like the moth to the flame. So love will lift you out of the darkness. And you'll hear a song that those who are ground walkers will never hear. We might have to medicate you. Resist your temptation to lie by speaking of separation from God. Otherwise, we might have to medicate you. In the ocean, a lot goes on beneath your eyes. Listen. They have clinics there too for the insane who persist in saying things like, I am independent from the sea. God is not always around, gently pressing against my body. So remember then, the medication for insanity that Hafiz is saying is that we are in a place of denying that we are one with God and that God is our very being. In him we live, move, and have our being. To not believe that and to use your language and thoughts to deny that requires medication. That's what he's saying. So this is, again, the Atma Vichara, the self-inquiry, the deep introspection that goes on. When you're looking at your thoughts and you're feeling your feelings and emotions, and you become really clear and really razor sharp in your discernment, you'll begin to see how your thoughts are either coming from this soil of separation. Like right now, you'll be thinking and identifying with certain thoughts. And those thoughts will have within them the code of I am separate, like at their core. Or you can have your thoughts coming from a place within your deeper self that are saying, I am not separate. I am one with God. That's why there's a great Sufi meditation where you breathe in and you say, not I. And when you breathe out, you say, only you. Not I, only you. And as that begins to heat up and permeate everything that's arising within you, every cell, every fiber, every thought, you begin to see God's face everywhere, in everyone. Not I, only you. Then you'll really get the sense of the wild and frantic voice that will try to come in and interrupt that. And then that's just another opportunity. Not I, only you. And then finally here. Now is the time. Now is the time to know that all that you do is sacred. Now, why not consider a lasting truce with yourself and God? Now is the time to understand that all your ideas of right and wrong were just child's training wheels to be laid aside when you can finally live with veracity and love. Hafiz is a divine envoy whom the Beloved has written a holy message upon. My dear, please tell me, why do you still throw sticks at your heart and God? What is it in that sweet voice inside that incites you to fear? Now is the time for the world to know that every thought and action is sacred. This is the time for you to deeply compute the impossibility that there is anything but grace. Now is the season to know that everything you do is sacred. That includes your loneliness, falling on your face, being humiliated, having your dreams dashed, having loved ones leave you. Everything becomes sacred when you can begin to see it as the necessary grace to move you further into yourself. Right? In A Course in Miracles, Jesus plays on this idea that we got from Freud, where he says that we have this natural instinct to exteriorize the sacred, that we put the sacred out there in churches, in gurus, in holy books. And he calls it the defense of exteriorization, that somehow we exclude ourselves from the immediacy of the sacred, and that the sacred is not in me. The sacred is somewhere in that person or that book or that building. And so we are excluding ourselves from the direct and immediate experience of our own nature. And so this teaching is about looking at what is causing that. That's why he says you don't have to go looking for love. You're swimming in it. You actually have to look at what you're doing moment by moment that is denying that love to arise in your awareness. What is it that you're doing or thinking right now, what you're saying to yourself right now, that's causing you to block this ocean of love in your heart? And so as we look and see that whatever it is that's arising is the block, we won't continue to want to perpetuate that into the next moment. We will be willing more and more to let it go, drop it, quiet down, calm, and allow this silence to dissolve whatever's arising. And that's the beauty of this silence. When you really cultivate silence, it has this effect because it's literally the pulse of the spirit, the spanda. And when you fall into that, when you dissolve as that pulse in the silence, whatever arises that's coming from the illusion will dissolve. It can't stay in your awareness. So that's the core of the teaching, right? Where we get into a place of ego death, seeing everything that's arising as an opportunity to go deeper into that state of grace. But there's that part of our mind that we came in here as, we may still be abiding in this moment as, and chances are we will probably get up and not shortly after, or even right now, leave as that frantic, distracted mind, because it's a habit. And that habit is something that we have to become aware of, because that mind is still telling you that there's something in the world that is still out there that you can get that will make you happy, right? And again, this teaching, one of the reasons why Jesus said in the Gospels that the way to life is a narrow way and few find it is because this way cuts out the distractions and the allurements of the world. And most of us are still under this belief that we can find something out there besides the reality of our own self. That's why in our final stop this morning, we're going to be looking at a section from the Course that talks about the real alternative. So remember what we started with this morning, that you're the spark of divinity, having a human experience. And that spark has the power of choice or decision. And it's making a decision every moment to either wake up or stay asleep. And this spark is the one listening right now. And the alternative for this spark is first only presented when you come to realize you're the spark and not the body. As long as you're sitting here as the body, you don't have the power of decision available to you yet. You may think you do, but if you stay as the body, you're in total ignorance or sleep from knowing that you are the divine spark. And if you are the body only, your choices will only be choices amongst illusions. Republican and Democrat, right? These are giving you the same world. They're giving you the world of illusion. Whatever you think is a choice within the world, is it simply a choice for the world as the body? When you begin to want to wake up, you begin to start to know that your choice is to allow this spark to either identify as the body and stay in the world, or go back into its spiritual nature and enlighten. That is the real alternative. You cannot find peace in the world. You cannot find love in the world with other bodies. You can keep trying. Nobody's stopping you. But when you're done, when that sorrow and that loneliness cuts deep enough, that's when the shell cracks and you begin to have that light emerge and you begin to feel the spark. And then that spark, when you really begin to feel it, wants to go home. Above all else, it wants to go home. So listen to this. There is a tendency to think the world can offer consolation and escape from problems that its purpose is to keep. Did you ever notice that? The world is a generator of problems. It creates more and more conflict. Those who speak for the world manufacture separation and perpetuate it. So that's the world's purpose, is to keep the separation going, right? And we just learned from Hafiz that separation is insanity. How can the ripple say that it's not part of the ocean? Why should this be? Because the world is a place where choice among illusions seems to be the only choice. And you are in control of outcomes of your choosing. Thus, you think, within the narrow band from birth to death, a little time is given you to use for you alone, a time when everyone conflicts with you, but you can choose which road will lead you out of conflict and away from difficulties which concern you not. But they are your concern. How then can you escape from them by leaving them behind? What must go with you, you will take with you, whatever road you choose to walk along. So this is the sobering wake-up call that he gives next. Why would you seek to try another road, another person, or another place when you have learned the way the lesson starts, but do not yet perceive that it always ends in a letdown, in despair, in loneliness. Right? I don't mean to, play the dirge here, but remember that the choices have to be laid out very clear. Right? In order to have the right direction, you have to see what direction leads to pain and which direction leads to joy. Our wild and frantic thought that wants to get something from the world will not like this. In fact, he says that wild and frantic thought is a dream, right? It's not who you are. And it's a dream, he says, that is actually a temper tantrum. So when you're faced with the starkness of this choice, the real alternative, you're oftentimes encountering a temper tantrum within yourself if you're paying attention. It's natural. It's part of the process. And think about it. The temper tantrum is, I don't want to. And if you cater to that, you're going to not only stay within the pain, but that temper tantrum it knows deep down that if you were to go home, it would die. So it will do everything. It's a master magician. It will do everything it can to keep your concentration, your focus within this tiny band of birth and death. I know, it's strong medicine. He says, learn now without despair. There is no hope of answer in the world. But do not judge the lesson which is but begun with this. Right? You got to face it. You look at it clearly. But that's the beginning of your happiness. You are the jewel. You are the priceless treasure. And you finally will turn away from wasting time and delay and looking outside of yourself for it in another. You'll finally know which direction to go in. That'll save a lot of time. Seek not another signpost in the world, which seems to point to still another road. No longer look for hope where there is none. Make fast your learning now, and understand you but waste time unless you go beyond what you have learned to what is yet to learn. For from this lowest point, right, when your hopes are dashed, when your world falls apart, where everything that you wanted doesn't seem to be panning out, from this lowest point will learning lead to heights of happiness in which you see the purpose of the lesson shining clear and perfectly within your learning grasp. Right? There is a choice which you have power to make when you have seen the real alternatives. But while you see choice where there is none, what power of decision can you use? The great release of power must begin with learning where it has a use and what decision has power if it be applied in situations without choice. So again, it's always this moment of what do I want? Who am I? And your decision. So finally here. This course attempts to teach no more than that the power of decision cannot lie in choosing different forms of what is still the same illusion and the same mistake. All choices in the world depend on this, that you choose between your brother and yourself, that you're not one, that you're separate. So just relax into this moment. Let everything quiet. Let the past drop away. And open your heart to the voice of the beloved. Let that song of God's love take you in deep. Past your needs, past your wounds, past all of your fears. Let that go and let love lift you up. Release that power of love at the core of your being. And that will show you that the world is truly sacred because you are sacred. Blue bag will go around. If you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube, you can donate by clicking the link below. We thank you for your generous support of our service. Any thoughts, questions? Mm-hmm. Well, everything will serve a purpose, but we'll come to see that the illusion was simply a lack of light, right? It was darkness or obscurity. And so it doesn't really exist or have a place except for us who currently believe in it, right? But as we begin to let our belief in it go and bring in more light and understanding, it will have served its function and have disappeared. Right? It will strengthen our muscles to concentrate and desire God more.
Like the darkness before the dawn, so to speak?
Yeah, well, that is the darkest before the dawn is what we were talking about earlier. That when you really feel your ego death coming on, that's oftentimes, you're at the cusp of that great golden dawn. Yeah. Anybody else? We bless this offering. We charge it with the intention that it bring light in whatever form is necessary, that we may continue to grow and find our true happiness and our true wisdom. And so it is. Final thoughts, questions? Oftentimes, this is when the brightest light can come in. If you have a question, concern.
I just want to thank whoever helped me put my coat on.
That was Ray. Okay. All right, I guess we'll end there. You can stand, we'll seal the deal. And find that place within the heart where you can soften and open to grace. And in this presence of grace, we know that the light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. And the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. Amen. Have a beautiful day, everybody. Thank you for being here. A Course in Miracles tomorrow night at 7:15 in this room. Join us.